Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Adriana stood at the heated lattice fence. It had been incredibly hot since morning. She was thirsty, but she was afraid to buy lemonade. After about 20 minutes, she still couldn't stand it and sat under the shade of a large tree. "Tishka, hi," joyfully exclaimed the girl. The cat purring contentedly jumped into her arms. They were similar not only in appearance. Dirty, disheveled hair, girls, and old hanging wisps of hair. But Adriana was not embarrassed by the fact that the cat was a stray. Truth be told, sometimes they would rummage together in the big dumpster. Near that store, Tishka would find something tasty, an uneaten pie, a piece of fresh bread, or a half-rotten apple. And they'd sit down to lunch together. "Tishka, you're my best friend. I have no one else but you." Adriana lovingly stroked the cat. "You know, someday we'll have a home together." Suddenly, Adriana jumped to her feet. "Tishka, go away. The old woman is coming." The girl quickly went to the gate of the church. "Don't you dare leave here," whispered the old woman quickly to Adriana. "You will be left without dinner tonight." She looked at her angrily and quickly walked away. Adriana stood silently, unable to hide her tears. The cat, seeing that she was alone, quickly ran up to her. "Tishka, my dear, be patient," said the girl through her tears. "You'll see, we will definitely escape from her." The day turned out to be very long. At last, the sun began to set. Adriana kissed her friend, stroked him once more, and slowly wandered home. The cat often saw her off and knew where she lived, but he never went into her yard. He seemed to understand everything when one day Adriana told him, "Tishka was my cat. Can't you come with me? Please wait for me outside the church. If the old woman catches you, she'll kill you. Where's the money?" The old woman asked the girl when she came in. Adriana handed her a plastic jar. "Why so little today? Lazy girl, why do I only feed you? I saw it today. How did you work? You'll be without food for 2 days." She grabbed Adriana by the arm and dragged her to the barn. The first time Adriana spent the night in the barn, she cried all night long. She was about 6 years old then. It was the end of October. The little girl was terribly cold. She begged her guardian to take her into the house, but she was adamant. In time, Adriana realized that she enjoyed torturing the girl and stopped reacting that way. Time passed, and within a year, the girl got used to her home. When it was cold, she burrowed into the straw and the remnants of an old blanket the old woman had thrown her. Adriana silently entered her barn, heard the creak of the door and the click of the lock. Looking around, there was water in an old bucket that Adriana had managed to collect during the last rain. She took the leaky ladle and quenched her thirst and washed her face. In fact, Adriana was even glad that she could be alone here. This way, she didn't have to face her inhuman guardian. The only thing that confused her was that the old woman wouldn't let her go to the toilet and told her to put it right in the barn. Adriana tried to fence the place off as best she could, but the dug hole of foul odors still made itself known. Not having no supper is not the worst thing in the world. Adriana thought, tomorrow with Tishka they would find something. But Adriana was afraid of the constant checks that her guardian was making. According to her plan, the girl had to stand near the church gate from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So she would go to check on her once, and sometimes even twice a day. She couldn't give herself away, so she would usually walk up, threaten angrily, and walk away. There was always something wrong with her. Then Adriana was standing wrong. Then she had a face that was too happy. Then a sign that said help for bread. "My mom is seriously ill" was out of sight. Anyway, every time she found a new reason. What was Adriana to be punished for? Sometimes, when people were especially scarce and the girl came without money, the old woman would whip her heartily. The first time, Adriana was shocked and cried a lot, but then she made a promise to herself that she would keep quiet. Despite such a young age, she quickly realized that if she showed her pain to her guardian, the guardian would become even angrier. Adriana sat down on the bed mat and stared into the large slit. Somewhere out there far away her home remained. She saw her mom sitting on the porch. "Mommy, Little Adriana ran into the yard. "Look what I brought you." The girl handed her mother a bouquet of cornflowers. "Baby, my darling, thank you." Mother hugged her daughter. "What a clever girl you are." "Mom, I love you so much." She kissed her mother's tanned cheeks. Adriana shuddered when she heard the deadbolt rattle. She quickly ran to the other wall into a small gap. She saw the guardian go somewhere else. Adriana was glad. She never felt safe when this woman was home. There were days that she would come in the evening and take out her anger on Adriana. She would curse her and her mother, and everything that was so dear to Adriana. And since the guardian's house stood on the outskirts, no one could hear what was going on behind those high walls. Adriana ran away many times, but she didn't know where she was going. She kept coming back. Besides, the old woman had some relative in the police force, so she could be found quickly. Adriana decided that in a year or 2 or 3, when she was older, she would be able to navigate better. And then she and Tishka would run away. She wanted to go home, but she didn't know the way back yet. The girl was seized again by memories. She had slept at Aunt Betty's for 3 days. She was told that her mother had gone somewhere and that she had to wait for her. On the 4th day, a man came to Aunt Betty's yard. Adriana didn't realize it was a policeman. They were discussing something with Aunt Betty. You could tell she was worried. She was talking and pointing at the house. "Aunt Betty, when is Mom coming?" Adriana asked fearfully when the strange uncle left. "Your mom needs to stay in town for a while. We'll wait here for her for now." Aunt Betty stroked the girl's head. A week later, Adriana came into the yard and didn't like her right away. Small angry eyes ran around the corners of her lips were downcast, giving the impression of constant displeasure. "Clara, hello," ran out Aunt Betty towards the strange woman. They talked for about half an hour, and Aunt Betty called her into the house. "This is Adriana." The neighbor introduced the girl. The old woman gave her a displeased look. "Adriana, this is your grandmother." Introduced the girl to the strange woman. The neighbor, well, certainly not her grandmother. "I'm a distant relative." Clara objected unhappily. "You'll stay at your relative's house for a while, and then your mom will pick you up. Don't worry, Mom will be here soon." Aunt Betty tried to cheer the girl up. Adriana woke up. It was already late afternoon. She felt sleepy. She threw on some old rags and fell asleep. Adriana saw herself in a large house, beautiful couches, large closets. Everything was unfamiliar to her. She wanted to go outside. Adriana opened the door and found herself in a beautiful flowering garden. Tishka ran towards her along the path between the bushes. "Adriana, my girl." She heard a familiar voice. "Mom," she exclaimed and woke up immediately. It was not the first time she had dreamt of this unfamiliar house. What was this place? She didn't know, but she felt good there. The only thing Adriana couldn't manage was to see her mom's face. She always heard only her voice. "Hey you, come on, get up," interrupted her joy, a nasty squeal. "Get ready for work." Adriana's stomach rumbled so much that she wanted to leave quickly. She longed to find something tasty to eat today. There were days that she and Tishka would find a big slice of pizza or a whole burger. One day they'd been so lucky, there was a whole stick of sausage in the dumpster. "You and your mother have gotten on my head." Clara muttered under her breath. She sent Adriana out the door. "I hate you so much. You're no use to me." In reality, it was all fake. Clara was making good money thanks to Adriana. And frankly, she was afraid of losing her. She remembered the first time she brought Adriana back. There was no limit to her anger then. Greedy for everything, she hated the girl. "I'm going to waste more money on her." "So what?" "So they pay me money as her guardian. Let them be thankful that I gave her a place to live," the old woman grumbled. But soon she figured out how to make a nice profit on Adriana. So she came up with a cunning plan. Summer was in full swing, and the sun had been blazing since morning. Adriana stood outside the church, setting out her work tools, a plastic jar, and a cardboard box with a big sign on it. Today was Sunday, and people were rushing to the morning service. "How's your mom, girl?" a young woman asked Adriana. She always threw Adriana a couple cents, and on holidays she put bills in her jar as well. Mommy is seriously ill. Adriana began to speak a memorized text. She needs expensive treatment, but there's no money. There is no money, even for bread. Help what you can. She never forgot to say thank you when coins were dropped into the jar. Thank you very much. God bless you and your family with good health. Adriana stood for another half an hour. When the cat Tishka appeared on the road, "Where are you?" "I'm so hungry." The girl ran towards him. "Let's hurry up. We only have 5 minutes." They stepped together to the big garbage can. Today was really a good catch: a whole can, a container of flotsam, a bag of overripe bananas, and 3 absolutely whole buns. "That's lucky," rejoiced Adriana, hugging the cat. Hiding behind a large tree, they had a quick breakfast. "Tishka, that's it. I have to go to work." Adriana got up. "I'll expect you at lunch." Today was not a bad day. Adriana looked into his jar. It was half filled with coins. She usually hid all the paper money in her pocket. Adriana leaned tiredly on the fence rail. After lunch, it was even hotter, and it was very hard to stand. Passers-by scurried back and forth, only occasionally paying attention to the little girl's calls. Adriana suddenly remembered her first days. She stood outside the church and cried loudly. People came up to her one after the other and asked her what had happened. "I want my mommy," sobbed the little girl. "Take me to my mommy." Someone called the police. A tall man got out of a car. "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." Adriana was put in the car and taken to the police station. "Where are you from? What's your name?" A strange woman asked her in a friendly manner. "Betty, I know this girl. She has a sick mother." A man about 45 years old approached her. "I'll take care of it." The man drove Adriana home. "You better be careful. Aunt Clara," he said to Adriana's guardian. "Talk to her sometime. She's not smart yet, Michael." She replied to her nephew. "You cover for me." For weeks, Adriana, sobbing, was taken to the police station. But then she was brought home again. "If you ever complain to anyone again," the old woman said, taking a knife from the table, "I'll skin you." Adriana was so badly frightened that she could not speak for days. From that day on, her complaints and her search for her mother stopped. Finally, the workday came to an end. Adriana hid the remaining bun and 2 bananas under the tree. She packed her things for tomorrow and went home. Not 20 meters away, she saw a familiar car near the fence. Adriana entered the yard and stepped into the shed. She didn't know why this uncle policeman had come and decided to lurk so as not to give herself away. A few minutes later, the door of the house creaked open and voices were heard. Several people walking past the barn suddenly stopped. Adriana stopped breathing. "Aunt Clara, I'm telling you it's impossible. Are you going to be tested?" says the man in the police uniform. "Well, do something." The guardian begged him. "What are we going to live on?" "Aunt Clara, the authorities will put Adriana in school, and if she doesn't go to school, you might even go to jail. You realize that. Whatever connections I have, but if it goes to the authorities, our heads will fly." Clara waved his hands nervously at his nephew. "What do I need her for?" Scolded the old woman, imposed. "On my head, damn her and her mother." "But you get good money for her," said the policeman. The old woman made a miserable face. "How can you live on that now? Do you know how much I spend on her? Do you think that if we had enough money, I would have started all this? I warned you, Aunt Clara. You do as you please." The man waved his hand and left the yard. Despite earning good money, that day Clara beat Adriana so that she couldn't walk for days. She lay on her stomach in the barn on the straw, and tears ran down her cheeks. "I'm going to run away from here," she whispered for sure. Tishka the cat ran nervously around outside the church, but Adriana was gone. The first day he waited for her until evening, without leaving his post under the old tree. The second day he sat at the church gate. Since morning he followed passers-by, looking them in the eyes, but could find no answer. At last he made up his mind. "Tishka," whispered Adriana joyfully, seeing his friend through the cracks in the barn. "Tishka, kitty, my kitty. I'm all right. Don't worry." Adriana was very afraid that the old woman might see the cat. She knew she'd stop at nothing until it was destroyed. "Run away," through her tears, she ordered. The cat ran, but suddenly stopped. He turned around and wanted to go back. Tisha, no, please go away. Adriana sobbed. She ducked her face into the straw so she couldn't be heard. When she looked up, the cat was gone. The next morning, Adriana got up. She washed her blood-soaked wounds and walked limping through the barn. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Adriana shuddered. Come on, get ready for work. There's nothing to do. The guardian came into the barn, seeing the wounds and bruises. She added that if they ask you, tell them you fell from a tree. Adriana walked slowly, making small stops. Her back buzzed from the whip, and the wounds on her knees made it hard to walk. She approached the church. There was a cat sitting by the gate. It was hard to tell what was on his mind, but from that day on he would not leave Adriana again. Clara paced nervously back and forth in the house. What am I going to do now? She asked herself. I had everything set up so well, and then this was it. The girl was making good money. But if she went to school, how would she be able to beg? Plus, she'd have to spend money on clothes, textbooks, and a lot of other things. Her plan was really good. After Kathy, Adriana's mother, was searched for days and not found, it became clear that the chances were slim. The villagers rarely went to the marshes. Only those who practiced healing herbs could survive there. When Clara took the girl in, she quickly realized there was something to be gained from it. She realized that if the mother was found, she would lose everything. Michael, dear, come quickly. The nephew heard his aunt's excited voice. 20 minutes later, he was in her yard. Aunt Clara, what's wrong? Concerned, he asked. Michael, this morning I went to check the mailbox, and there it was. She held out a piece of paper. Aunt Clara, thanks for Adriana, don't look for me. I met the man of my dreams. I'm not coming back. I'm sorry. Michael read the note. So we've been on a wild goose chase looking for her, and she's making a life for herself. Did Aunt Clara swear? I've put such a burden on myself. She's old and in poor health. Yes, it turns out she just ran away. Her nephew Michael supported her. But then you can make sure that the investigator leaves me alone. If everything has become clear, so maybe the case can be stopped begging, said Clara. Yeah, why bother with the police? I'll attach this note to the case, and we'll call it a day, Michael replied. Clara realized that she had planted the note on herself. She was taking a risk, but there was nowhere she could go but to Kathy's swamp. And if she did, she could hardly get out of there alive. It had been a very hard day, and Adriana could hardly walk home. The hot sun had baked her wounds, and they were starting to pull at her skin. Tikkun followed her confidently. They came to a high fence. Tisha, let's make a deal, Adriana said, looking the cat straight in the eye. If I'm not in our place, only then you hear. Only then will you carefully sneak into the yard. Promise me. The cat squeezed his eyes shut. All right, now go away, ordered the mistress. The cat slowly wandered back. Clara didn't know what to do. She wanted to take her anger out on Adriana, but stopped herself. She'd get herself in trouble by overdoing it. Because of that fucking girl, she thought. Adriana gave all the money to the guardian and went to her barn. She carefully sat down on the straw bedding and closed her eyes. She wanted to lie down, but her back hurt so badly. She heard the click of the lock and realized that the old woman had locked her in. After a few minutes, Adriana fell asleep. The room was dark and Adriana could not see anything. Suddenly, she heard someone moaning. Did she come closer? No. Clara screamed, covering her face with her hands. What's wrong? Adriana asked her. Get it off, screamed Clara, and Adriana woke up abruptly. She felt a little better today. Ethan watched her. The young girl flashed between the trees and came to a large flower bed. Plucking the flowers, she examined them for a long time. Cindy called to her that one. She turned and walked joyfully toward it. I like wildflowers so much, she said. Just look at those cornflowers. You are my most beautiful flower. Putting his arm around the girl's waist, Ethan pulled Cindy to him. How long have I been looking for you? I must have waited a long time for you, she replied. But then she lowered her eyes sadly. Ethan still couldn't believe that he had met the woman of his dreams. Yes, they had met under very strange circumstances, but she was definitely the light that came from her. giving him everything he had ever dreamed of. Tired of luxury pacifiers and fortune hunters, he'd literally found her. "What are you thinking about, looking at her hair?" he asked. "We've been together for over a year now, but there's no way I can." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Honey, it takes time. Be patient. The doctor said it's possible. We just have to wait a little longer." He reassured her. "Let's go for a little drive, go out of town, visit unfamiliar places." "Come on," she agreed. After lunch, they got in the car and drove off, wherever the eye could see. Ethan loved Cindy very much. His only wish was to make her happy, and he did his best to help her. The car stopped beside a huge field. The ears of wheat glistened with gold. It was harvest time. Cindy wanted to pick some breadfruit, so she walked forward. Suddenly, she heard "Mommy, Mommy." She turned around. There was no one around. There was complete silence. She turned around and went to the car. "Ethan, let's go home, please," she said excitedly. "What's wrong with you, Cindy?" He hugged her. "I heard that voice again. Please take me home." All the way home they were silent. Bits and pieces of old memories, constantly haunting his wife, but there was nothing he could do about it. Ethan decided to visit his friend the next day. It was about 10 o'clock when the door opened and Ethan entered the private clinic. "Ethan." "Hi." William, a middle-aged man, hugged him. "It's good to see you." Ethan replied cheerfully. "Breathe in amazement," the doctor asked. "Did you make it? Where were you treated, here or abroad?" "William, to tell you the truth, it's an unusual story." "Ethan, curing the asthma you've had since you were a child. It's a miracle, I'm telling you as a doctor. Whatever you're treating it with, please tell me." "William, it's a long story. I'm in no hurry." William asked not to be disturbed for about an hour, and the men sat down at the table. "So," said William, making tea. "So," repeated Ethan. "My condition got worse and worse. The attacks became so frequent that sometimes I thought I would suffocate in paralysis. To no avail. A few months in the capital. I decided not to procrastinate any longer and organized treatment in Germany. I really felt better. But my GP said the remission wouldn't last long. They didn't know how to help me either. When I returned home, I realized that official medicine had done everything it could for me. I resigned myself to it and just waited to see which of my attacks would be my last. One day I was approached by our gardener, Ethan. Maybe it's none of my business, but I know a witch doctor. He saved my brother. He's weird, but he's helped a lot of people," the gardener said. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I had another attack, I decided to take a chance. "Liam, where does this witch doctor live? Maybe he could come here. I will pay him well," I asked the gardener. "Unfortunately, it won't work. He only accepts at his place. Some he gives herbs to, some he puts his hands on, and some he takes to the forest. He has his own method of treatment for each patient. Anyway, I went to see this healer. Liam told me how to find my way to him. I arrived, knocked on the gate, no one answered. I thought the old man probably wasn't home. And after a while, the healer's neighbor came outside. 'Do you know where Grandfather Noel might be?' I asked her. 'He is sitting in the yard,' she answered. I started knocking again. Grandpa doesn't come out. I think maybe he's deaf. Anyway, I yelled like that for half an hour. Then I spit on it all, got in the car, and was about to go, when suddenly the gate opened. 'You gave up too quickly,' said a short old man with a beard. 'You want to become healthy, but you have no patience.' I was taken aback. 'How do you know?' 'So, if you have no health problems, then why did you come to me?' He took me to his place. I'm sitting on a bench, and he's staring at me, his eyes fixed on me. 'What kindergarten?' I'm thinking. Then the grandfather sat down next to me and says only one thing. 'An old pine tree near the Supreme Marshes.' I agree, I'll pay you. What do you need their cones or bark? The old man says you have to go there yourself. You know, that's too much. I got up and went home. A few days passed, and I got worse and worse. I went to my grandfather's village again. I drove up, and he was sitting on a bench outside the house. 'What's up? When do we go out now, or shall we have tea?' The old man asked contentedly, so we had tea. We changed our clothes and went out. You'll do what I tell you. We will have a long road." And indeed, the road was long. I was beginning to think the old man was going to take me somewhere and leave me. "It's still a little way to the high bogs. We'll cut down to the bottom," said Grandfather Noah. It must have been about 3 hours when we reached the place. The old man showed us his hand. "Now we'll go up and be near it." The pine tree was indeed huge. It was probably over 100 years old, even maybe 200 years old. The trunk was so big that the two of us couldn't reach it. "Go to the tree, lean your head against it, and start breathing," said the healer. So I did. It was hard to breathe at first, but then it was as if the air itself began to fill my bronchi and lungs. I couldn't remember ever being able to breathe so freely before. I felt so good that I even lost track of time. The old man stood by a pine tree and mumbled some prayers. "Now imagine that you feel sick and you want to get rid of everything in your stomach," said the healer. At first I didn't succeed, but then I did feel sick. And after a while, yellow foam started coming out of me. I don't know how long it lasted, but after a while I collapsed exhaustedly on the grass. "Well, everything's going to be all right now, son," said the old man, stroking my head. "And I haven't had another attack since." William opened his mouth in surprise. "Ethan, and you know that pine essential oils are one of the best remedies for lung diseases. Apparently, due to its age, this pine tree produces such oils in very high concentrations, which has had such an effect. I'm shocked. How my grandfather knew about this, William, I don't know, but the old man did so much for me." They talked some more, and Ethan said, "William, I really need your help. It's about my wife." After seeing her husband off, Cindy walked around the garden. She loved being here. It reminded her of something, but she couldn't remember what it was. Chamomile cornflowers. She ran her hand over the flowers. Mommy suddenly heard her. Cindy turned around, and there was no one in the garden. It was the first time she had heard that voice. The day after she was discharged from the hospital, and it had haunted her ever since. What does that mean? Cindy wondered to herself. It had been a little over a year, but she still hadn't found an answer. She wandered the narrow paths in silence, realizing that she was very lucky. Ethan had become everything to her. The first time she had seen him in the hospital, she had been very confused. "Don't worry," the young man had said and taken her hand. "I will stay with you." At first it seemed to Cindy that he was helping her out of compassion. But very quickly she noticed how his eyes lit up. After a few months, and she realized she was in love. She didn't know what would happen next, but her heart told her that Ethan could be trusted, and she trusted. From that day on, she could be called the happiest woman ever, if only she could. Cindy beloved. She heard the familiar voice of Ethan's kin. Ran out to meet him. "She's Cindy. I've spoken to my friend William. He's got a good doctor in mind. We're all going to see him Thursday afternoon. Is that okay with you?" Ethan. "Well, of course, I'm so anxious to get back to normal." July passed quickly. Now it was August. Clara realized that there was very little time left, but she couldn't figure out what to do about Adriana. Why didn't I think of that before? One morning, she exclaimed happily that she would get rid of the girl and make good money that day. Toward evening, there was a knock at her wicket. "I'm coming," she shouted. There were several strangers standing near the fence. "We are from Jacob," pronounced one of them. "Come in," she said friendly. "You don't do this kind of business on the street." 2 men and a woman entered the courtyard. Clara led the guests into the house. "She is a docile girl. She works well." The landlady started the conversation. "How old is she?" An elderly gypsy asked. 7. "Recently we had to see her in action first, and then we'll discuss the price. So you should come to the church. She's at the gate. She is alone there. You will notice her at once. We will look at her now, and then we will solve our questions." The gypsies left Clara's house and went towards the church. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the heat was beginning to subside. A black-haired girl stood near the church fence, her hair disheveled and dirty. Her old clothes were gaping holes, and her dirty feet were wearing rubber slippers that were too big for her. Adriana occasionally made pitiful appeals for help. "Well," counseled the old gypsy with his relatives. "She can work," the young man said. "And she looks so pathetic," the woman added. The gypsies returned to Clara. "I told you the girl is good. You'll be lucky to have her. She chirped around them. The old gypsy offered a price. No way. I've invested so much in her, I've given so much to her. The guardian shook her head negatively. They could not come to an agreement for a long time, but in the end they managed to agree only as they had agreed on the 25th. If you take the girl before then, I'll call the police. You'll be in trouble. She looked at the gypsies with an angry look. Our man will come to you on the 23rd, late in the evening, to confirm our agreement. Clara rubbed her hands together contentedly. She had raised the price on purpose, of course, but she had never dreamed of such a sum. So from this day forward, I will stop feeding her. I won't spend another dime on her, the old woman decided. And this time Clara's plan was good. The police knew that Adriana was looking for her mother and had tried to escape more than once. The gypsies would pick her up at night and take her far away. From here, the police would not find Adriana. They won't have a case against Clara. Michael will cover it up. Hello, Ethan. Hello, Cindy, said William, opening the car door. Hello, Ethan's friend was greeted by his wife. Hello, William. Get in, said Ethan. You show us the way because I don't know where to go. Yes, it's not far, he said. The road was half empty, so they arrived at the place in half an hour. Mason is an experienced doctor. He has had several such cases in his practice. Of course, it's not an easy case. And no one can guarantee a quick result, William said, getting out of the car. I understand, Cindy replied, but I'm ready for anything. They went up the stairs, knocked on the right door. William, friends, come in, greeted the doctor to the guests. Everyone entered the office. Mason invited everyone to sit down and said, Cindy, we will talk to you a little later. Please, on the couch. You need to relax and close your eyes. I'm going to ask your husband some questions. You just listen. Ethan, when did you first see Cindy? I'll start at the beginning. I've been asthmatic since I was a child and suffered greatly from it. Despite my father's condition, my parents never managed to cure me. They got the most expensive medicines and inhalers, but the disease calmed down only for a while. And then it came back again. Over time, the remission period got much shorter. And a few years ago, my life turned into hell. Traditional medicine could no longer help me, so I turned to a witch doctor for help. Grandfather Noah said there was a very old pine tree in the upper marshes, and if I went with him, I had a chance of being healed. I agreed, and we went there. And indeed, being near that mighty tree, a miracle happened to my bronchi. They cleared up. For the first time in my life, I began to breathe freely. The road was long, and Noah's grandfather said that we would walk back through the lowlands to cut an hour and a half. The places were swampy and dangerous, but the old healer knew them well. You see, Wagoner Swampy showed the healer on bushes with white terry caps. Many herbs are blooming now in June. And how long have you been doing this? I asked the old man. What for? Well, treating people. How could it be me? It's Mother Nature, but not everyone can know about diseases. I argued with him. Ethan is like a family name that's inherited, and so is this gift. My father wasn't interested in it. But my grandfather did. He helped so many people. I'm no match for him. You see, Mallard, it's good for your thyroid. And not just thyroid. You'd think, what good is this little herb? You see, as I got closer, my foot fell into something soft. You be careful. Swamp's a thing. You gotta keep your eyes open. I decided not to take any more risks and followed my grandfather. Suddenly, he stopped abruptly. My God, is there a man lying there? I looked, I didn't see anything. I see the old man quickly walked forward and disappeared somewhere. I started to catch up with him. I came to the place where grandfather disappeared, and there was a cliff. And there's someone lying down near the swamp. She's alive, only unconscious. Ethan, come on, help. I went down, and there was a woman. Her face was smashed in. There were big branches lying around. One of them must have hit her on the head. There was blood all over her head and face. Ethan, take off your clothes quickly. Grandpa Noah made a sort of stretcher out of twigs and our clothes. We put the woman on it and carried her into the steppe. We can't go through the low marshes there. It's a dangerous place. We won't risk it. We'll turn back where I told you Grandpa Noah was, and she's definitely alive. Shocked. I asked, "Yes, Ethan, but we don't have much time. She needs to be taken to the hospital, to intensive care. I can't help her with that." We walked quickly, bumping over bumps and trying not to drop the stretcher. "Grandpa Noah, what could have happened?" "I don't know, Ethan, but those places are very dangerous. Very few people can navigate them. It's a large area under the marshes, and there are many villages around. Usually witch doctors and healers go to the high marshes for healing herbs. Only a short distance, entering the area below the marshes," he replied, out of breath. Finally, we came to a country road. Our strength was almost gone. "Ethan, come on, hurry up," the old man urged me. We ran with faltering feet to a familiar gate. "Get in the car," Noah commanded. Ethan drove as fast as he could. I quickly jumped into the car and drove at full speed to the nearest hospital. The woman was still alive. She was quickly taken to the emergency room. They told me to come back tomorrow, so I drove home. The next day, I was told she was in a coma and no one knew if she would survive. For the first time in my life, I started praying. I have never been so worried about a stranger. One day went by one day after another, but nothing changed. One night, the phone rang. "Ethan." She'd come out of her coma. I rushed to the hospital as fast as I could. The woman was asleep. They took the bandages off her face because the wounds had healed a little. I saw a young woman in front of me. She seemed the most beautiful to me, despite the wounds and bruises on her face. In the morning, she woke up and opened her eyes where I asked her, "Are you in the hospital?" "I'm fine now." I tried to reassure her. She looked at me with her big eyes and asked, "Who are you?" "My name is Ethan." "What's your name?" She wanted to answer quickly, but stopped herself. "I don't know. Do you remember where you're from? Where your home is?" She shook her head in the negative. From that day on, I started calling her Cindy. Unfortunately, she has complete amnesia. All you have to do is wait. The doctor sympathetically told me Cindy. Ethan fell silent. "Ethan, did you talk to the police about finding the woman?" Mason asked another question. "Yes, I went straight to the police," he replied. One day, when Cindy was still in a coma, an investigator came. I told him everything. "We'll ask around," he said. "But there are about 20 villages around these swamps. As long as she's in a coma, the chances are too slim." When Cindy came out of her coma, the investigator came again. We checked all the places, interviewed the locals. But no one went missing for the next 2 months, he sighed. "It could be a premeditated murder. It's hard to say. But if it is, she's not local. And this case is going to drag on for a long time." "Ethan, you yourself tried to find out where Cindy heard Mason's voice coming from." "When Cindy was in a coma, I couldn't take a picture. It didn't make sense. You could barely see her eyes through the bandages. When Cindy was released from the hospital, we went to see Grandpa Noah. Ethan is good to see," he smiled. "Grandpa Noah is the woman we saved, Cindy." She said hello. "Very glad." The old man looked at her. "Grandpa Noah, we are very grateful to you." A little embarrassed, I said. "And so you are together now. That's how it is. Congratulations." He patted Ethan on the shoulder. "Yes, but Cindy, unfortunately, doesn't remember anything." Grandpa Noah asked me to go into the other room. After half an hour, he came out to me and said to Ethan, "It's a difficult case. Unfortunately, I can't help you. Grandfather Noah told us which villages most often people go to the swamp. So we drove out there. We went to all of them, but no one recognized Cindy." Everyone was quiet. Suddenly Mason interrupted the silence. "Do you remember anything Ethan said that I remember opening my eyes and seeing him?" Ethan was a stranger to me. I remember everything after that moment, but I don't remember what happened before that. "Okay." In a calm voice, he said, "Starting tomorrow, we'll start having sessions twice a week. Ethan, please resume traveling again to the places around those marshes. Enough time has passed that there is a chance that Cindy will start to remember something. Walk the streets of the villages, look at the houses, talk to the locals. I don't think this is some kind of premeditated murder. If it was, someone would have spotted the stranger in their village anyway. And assuming it was planned by one of their own, They would have covered their tracks by dumping the body in the swamp, and the missing person would have been discovered quickly. Unfortunately, the police have been sadly slow on the uptake, Ethan said. Even though my father asked them to help, they never found anything. Ethan and Cindy sat in the kitchen, scrutinizing the map. Cindy, how about it? Where do we start? Ethan asked her husband. I don't know, maybe this one. She pointed to a village called Vyazma. Okay, let's start with this one, and then we'll drive around the rest one by one. Early the next day, Ethan and Cindy got in the car. Everyone seemed to have their money and cards with me. Water and food in the back seat. So what's up with God? Said Ethan and turned the key. August was coming to an end with dry grass and slightly shriveled trees. They said summer would soon be behind them. Outside the window, the fields were deserted. Only occasionally interspersed with a small forest, Cindy looked out the window. She was catching some new feelings in herself and was afraid to let them frighten her away. Ethan, I feel like something's going to happen. I don't know how to explain it. I just feel it, Cindy said. Hopefully you'll see something familiar and start to remember, he replied. Vyazunka turned out to be a very small village. 3 streets and old houses did not evoke any memories for Cindy. They walked through the streets near one of the houses. On a bench sat an old woman, a grandmother. Do you know this woman? Pointing at Cindy, asked Ethan. No, she answered briefly. We don't have any of those. They wandered on for a while longer, looking around. No, Ethan was unfamiliar with everything here. Let's move on, said Cindy, and they walked back to the car. Ethan and his wife traveled to 5 villages that day, but they never found out anything. Cindy didn't know these places. And the locals, when asked if you knew this woman, shook their heads in the negative. Don't worry about a thing. Ethan cheered up his wife. We'll go again tomorrow. Look how many places we have not yet traveled. They got home late that day. The sun had already set. The next day, Ethan and Cindy were up early in the morning. They visited 3 more villages, but all were in vain. Cindy, there is a small town about 30 kilometers around the bend, according to the map. Let's stop by. I didn't bring enough water with me today. It was about 10 a.m. when their car stopped in front of Ethan's small square. I'll wait for you here. The wife asked, Can I stay a while? Alone? Ethan realized that the search had been unsuccessful, and Cindy began to worry. She had high hopes for these trips, but so far they had not been realized. Okay, I'll quickly take my time. I'll be waiting. Ethan walked down the street and found out that the big store was about 20 minutes from here. He decided he needed to get some more groceries. They wanted to drive around as many villages as possible today. On the way, he thought about the fact that perhaps Cindy had a family, a husband, and children. It hurt him, even though they couldn't officially get married because Cindy didn't have any papers. He still considered her his wife after all. Ethan stepped out onto the busy street. People were going back and forth. On the right side, he saw a large store on the left a little farther away with gold shimmering domes. Ethan walked toward the store, but halfway there he turned around. What an oak tree! His gaze fell on the old tree. He looked at it differently now that he was healed. You all right, brother? He patted the wide trunk. Ethan didn't want to approach the church, but the orphan girl standing there caught his eye. What are you doing here? He asked the child in surprise. Mommy's sick. The girl started to say, but for some reason she lowered her eyes. Ethan was shocked. The child's long, unwashed hair, old rags, dirty feet. Are you thirsty? Not knowing what to say, he asked. The girl nodded. Adriana hadn't eaten properly for days and could barely stand on her feet. She looked the strange uncle straight in the eyes. She wanted to say something, but she was afraid to. Stay here, don't go. I'll be right back, said Ethan and ran like an arrow into the store. The beggar girl had hit him so hard he couldn't recover. He filled 2 bags with groceries and lemonade and ran out of the store. We are very grateful to you, Uncle. Adriana replied cheerfully. We are you and your mom, asked Ethan. The girl lowered her eyes. Me and my friend Tishka. She pointed at the cat. Oh, you're not here alone, but with company, Ethan joked. He didn't want to say goodbye to the girl, but Cindy was waiting for him in the car. We'll stop by on the way back and talk to the little girl. Maybe there's something I can do to help her." Adriana had never eaten like that in all this time. She and Tashika quickly emptied a whole bag of Tashika. "It was so good," she said, hugging the cat. She felt so good, but it was time to get up. The old woman could come any minute. For the past 2 weeks, she had kept her eyes on Adriana and checked on her 3 to 4 times a day. Adriana decided to put everything in one bag and hide it in the hollow of an old oak tree. Suddenly, something hard touched her hand. She pulled something from the bottom of the bag. Opening the button, she realized it was a wallet. Adriana saw money, some plastic cards, and a photograph. "Mom!" she exclaimed. Adriana couldn't believe her eyes. She didn't know who this uncle was, but he could definitely help her. Mom's picture said that they knew each other. Adriana, with trembling hands, hid the wallet behind the elastic band of her old shorts. "Tishka, did you see that? It's my mom." She kissed the cat happily. "How can I find her now?" Adriana was looking forward to going home. She decided to hide the purse in the straw. In a few days, she would start looking for that uncle and mom. When she got home, Adriana gave the money to her guardian and went to her barn. She was so excited that she couldn't sleep. It was dark when suddenly some rustling sounds were heard. Adriana fell silent. She heard clanking, bolts, and voices. "Well, what's the deal?" the man asked. If the price remains the same, yes, she heard a familiar voice. "Yes, everything is as agreed," the stranger confirmed. "Tomorrow the girl will work her last day, and at night you will pick her up." Adriana's heart beat like a wounded bird. "They're talking about me," she thought. "I must run." The gate closed again, and there was silence. Adriana did not fully understand what was happening, but she sensed the danger clearly. "I'm not coming back here tomorrow," she told herself. "Cindy, I'm sorry." Panting, Ethan ran up to the car. "I met a little beggar girl outside the church. You should have seen her. She looks like she needs help. We'll talk to her on the way back." "Okay," Ethan answered Cindy. "Let's help the child." The afternoon sun was starting to warm up as they pulled onto the highway. "Let's go this way." Cindy pointed to the farthest village. "It's about 2 hours away." "Maybe tomorrow morning?" he asked Ethan. "Why am I drawn to this place?" She insisted. All the way there, the girl had been on Ethan's mind. If the mother is sick, why doesn't the girl have a guardian? He thought. It would be one thing if they lived in a remote village, but this was a city, albeit a small one. The girl looked so bad that she seemed to have been neglected for 2 or 3 months, maybe more. Her skinny body and the circles under her eyes clearly showed that she had been hungry since the cat. They even had something in common. Finally, there was a fork in the road. Ethan turned onto a country road. Ethan pulled over. Cindy asked him. She got out of the car. The places were unfamiliar, but something resonated inside. She walked back and forth a little. "Did you remember something?" her husband asked her. "No, but it felt like I'd been here." They stood for a while and decided to drive into the village. They drove through the streets and found no one. It was surprisingly hot today. The villagers were hiding in their houses. "You go down this street, and I'll try to ask around." Ethan pointed to the nearest alley. Cindy walked forward. She looked at the houses and recognized nothing. But she had the distinct feeling that she had been here once. She looked carefully at the old walls and dilapidated wickets. When she reached the end of the street, she turned back. As she walked slowly, trying not to miss a single detail, a voice came from behind her. "So did your lover leave you?" Cindy turned around sharply. There was a young woman standing in front of one of the houses. "Are you talking to me?" she asked in surprise. "Kathy, I realize you're ashamed to look people in the eye. But to pretend that you don't know me, it's too much." With her arms at her sides, the stranger was indignant. Cindy stepped closer to her. "Do you know me?" she asked excitedly. "Stop fooling around. You left your child for some man. That your coho left you? So you're left with nothing. You lost your house and your daughter. That's what you should do." Angrily, the woman replied. When Ethan turned to the street, he noticed that Cindy was talking to someone. Did someone recognize her? He became agitated. As he approached them, he stopped. "Hello," he said. "Hello. Good day to you too. The woman replied grudgingly. Ethan, this woman recognized me, Cindy said in a trembling voice. Do you know her? Ethan asked the strange woman. Of course I know Kathy, she answered quickly. A little over a year, me and one other person. They found her unconscious near the ethereal swamps. She was in a coma for a long time. When she came to, she couldn't remember a thing. Ethan was quick to tell us. How can that be? It can't be. The woman was surprised. Indeed, more than a year ago, Kathy disappeared. They looked for her for days and never found her. I'm her neighbor, Betty. Betty. We've been trying to recover my wife's memory for a long time, but so far without success. Please help us. What can I do? She asked in confusion. Can you tell us how she lived? Ethan asked her. This is her house, the neighbor said. That's where she lived. If you want to see it, no one lives there now. The gate creaked and Ethan and his wife and Betty entered the yard. It seems as if everything is familiar, but I can't remember, Cindy said tiredly. Cindy, go through the house yourself, see if anything comes up, Ethan suggested. She climbed up on the porch and entered the house. Why Cindy? The neighbor wondered. She couldn't even remember her own name, so we started calling her Cindy, Ethan replied. Tell me about her. What's there to tell? Betty shrugged. As long as I can remember. Kathy lived with her grandfather Mason. His daughter Kelly went to the city when she was young. Stayed there ever since. Nobody knows who Kathy's father was. But one day Kelly brought the girl back and asked him to watch her for the summer. So Kathy stayed here, and a few years later they told the grandfather that his daughter had been killed in an accident. She and I were the same age for school. We went to the neighboring village together. Grandpa Mason was a strong herbalist. He could find herbs that other people were afraid to go after. He was the last one I remember who could walk in the lower marshes. Oh, it's a dangerous business. There was a time when big money was offered for rare herbs, so many people left in those swamps. At first, Kathy's grandfather left her with his neighbors, but when she grew up, he started taking her with him. You can't say Kathy took over her grandfather's craft, but she knew her herbs as Kathy grew older. Everyone followed her around. James, who lived on the outskirts. Grandfather Mason told her that Kathy was going to marry her. Grandpa didn't mind. He wanted to get his granddaughter settled before he died. But it turned out that James had a fling with Kathy and left her. He left the village and was never seen again. Kathy gave birth to a baby girl named Adriana. Mason's grandfather understood, and he didn't leave Kathy. So the three of them began to live together. Betty stopped and was quiet for a moment. Please go on, Ethan asked her. When Grandpa Mason was very old, Kathy went to get herbs. Adriana was 3 or 4 years old at the time. Her grandfather would give her directions on where to look for herbs. But he knew it was dangerous to go for rare herbs. So Kathy gathered common herbs from the edges of the marshes. It wasn't much money, but it was always enough for bread. But when Mason's grandfather died, she felt hard done by. She wanted to go to the city to work, but who would she leave her child with? And she loved her daughter dearly, so she stayed here. When she went to buy herbs in season, she left Adriana with me. She came to me that day and said, Betty, look after Adriana. You're out for herbs? I asked her. No, I've got some errands to run. Please leave her. I replied. From that day on, she was never seen again. Where's Adriana? Ethan asked. Kathy had been looking for Adriana for days. I had the police searching all the places near the marshes, but they didn't go deep. Everyone knew that if Kathy went there, there was no turning back. But there was still hope that Kathy navigated those places like no one else. Grandpa Mason had taught her that. 4 days after Kathy's disappearance, a policeman told me that if they didn't find her, they would look for one of their relatives. Otherwise, Adriana will end up in an orphanage. Kathy was never found. And I was told that a distant relative was to come for Adriana. A week later, an elderly woman arrived. I think her name was Clara. She took Adriana, but the search for Kathy was still on. One day, the district officer comes to me and says we're looking for Kathy. We've been looking for her, and she's living the good life with some guy. I didn't even know what he was talking about at first. We closed the Kathy case, he says. She slipped a note to a relative of hers that Adriana took there. She said she was sorry. "I'm sorry, I found my love. Don't look for me." A month later, some people came to look at the house. "What do you want there?" I asked them. "We're looking at the house. We want to buy it." "How to buy?" I was surprised. "We have an agreement with the girl's guardian. She wants to sell the house to buy an apartment for the child in the city." Anyway, we came back a week later. It turned out they'd bought the house after all. They threw everything out of there. There were just bare walls and a stove. They asked me to keep an eye on it and left. Since then, no one has ever come here again. There was a creak. Cindy came out of the house. I thought I might find some things, but the house was empty. Nothing in the house. She sighed regretfully. Yeah, new owners for 3 days. There was a fire. They were cleaning up. They wanted to bring in new furniture, but it didn't work out, Betty said. They stood for a while longer. It was about 6 o'clock at the house, and Cindy and Ethan had to get home. Betty, thank you so much. You've been very helpful. Ethan thanked her. If we need your help again, will you be there for us? Of course, she replied sympathetically, looking at Cindy. They drove back quickly. The sun was steadily sinking below the horizon. I'll call my contact at the police right now, so they can start looking for the girl, Ethan said, taking out his cell phone. So where are my business cards? He started searching through his pockets for his wallet, but it was nowhere to be found. Did I lose it? Not again. Ethan was angry. Ethan, when was the last time you saw your wallet? Cindy was trying to help her husband. I was paying at the store. That's right. I was buying a girl begging for food, and I was so excited I dropped my wallet in one of the bags. We're going over there now. She was standing outside the church. An hour later, they stopped near an old oak tree, but it was almost dark. The church gate was closed, and no one was around. How could I have been so inattentive? Ethan scolded himself. Let's go home. My wife said calmly. We'll be here tomorrow morning. It had been a very hard day, and Ethan agreed. He realized that there was nothing that could be done now. Adriana had been up all night. She couldn't wait for morning. At last it dawned. She took out her purse from the straw, unfolded it, and looked at the picture. Mommy, we will surely meet soon. Through her tears, she whispered. She took the picture out of her pocket and pressed it to her chest. Suddenly, the door opened abruptly. Adriana jumped up quickly, hiding her purse behind her back. What have you got there? Asked the old woman. Nothing. The girl replied in a trembling voice. Where are you going? The guardian shouted angrily. I have nothing. Adriana burst into tears. Clara squeezed her shoulder hard. The girl cried out in pain and dropped her purse. Could the guardian pick it up immediately? What is this purse? Did you steal it? Did she hit Adriana? No, my uncle lost it and I picked it up. The girl was crying. What a bitch. Are you trying to get me in trouble for the last few days? She shoved Adriana with all her might and she fell to the ground. You're staying home tonight. Thank God you'll be picked up tonight. No, let me out, please. Clara Adriana begged. I'll bring you a lot of money today. Please. Adriana heard the door creak open in the house. No, she sobbed. She had cried for half an hour. She wanted to sleep. So she walked over to her old bucket and saw her mom's picture on the ground off to the side. Mommy's favorite. You didn't leave me. The girl kissed her mom. It was already about 9 o'clock. Adriana didn't know what to do now. Suddenly there was a rustle. Tishka is my cat. Adriana whispered joyfully. He tried to get into the barn, but the slits were too narrow. He tried to tear the boards with his paws, but he couldn't. What are we going to do now? With her head down on her knees, Adriana sobbed. You understand everything. Help me, my friend. She stretched out her fingers and reached into the cat's fur. The cat licked them happily and Adriana's temples pounded hard. She quickly dug the hole in the ground, pulled out a small yellowed leaf and wrote Adriana. She couldn't write and reading was the only thing her mom had taught her. She let the writing dry and carefully folded the leaf, but after thinking about it, she put a picture of her mom in it. It took Adriana a long time to get the note tied around the cat's neck. The slits were too small and she couldn't tie the rope. Suddenly, the door creaked open and the guardian appeared on the doorstep. Finally, Adriana managed to make a knot. "What have you got there?" Hearing the rustle, went Clara. "Tisha, run!" shouted Adriana. Old woman saw the cat and wanted to catch it. But Tishka dodged. She quickly picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at him. The cat fell. "Tishka?" "No." Sobbing, Adriana shouted, "Please get up. Tisha, get up." Clara spotted a pitchfork nearby and quickly grabbed it. The cat got up and limped toward the big hole in the fence. "Hurry up," Adriana shouted with all her might. Clara threw the pitchfork with a swing, but the cat had time to get through. She ran to the gate, opened the deadbolt. She looked all along the fence, but the cat was nowhere to be seen. "Oh, you filthy girl," the guardian roared, and headed for the barn. "I'll make it up to you. You'll sleep in the cellar tonight." She ran into the barn in anger and grabbed Adriana by the arm. "No. Where are you taking me?" Stubbornly, the old woman choked back tears. She dragged Adriana through the house and stopped in the last room, pulling up the trapdoor. She opened the basement. "That's where you belong." She growled angrily. "No," resisted Adriana. Pulling the girl down the ladder, she dragged her upstairs so Adriana couldn't climb up. The basement was cold and damp. Adriana was very frightened, but in the darkness, she suddenly heard Adriana. "The girl is my mom," she exclaimed. The girl felt that Mommy was near and she would surely find her. "Do you know the girl who was standing here yesterday?" asked Ethan. The little beggar entered the churchyard. "So she stands here every day. She has no days off," joked the janitor. "Where does she live?" "Who knows where she lives? She's usually on duty by 8 o'clock. Ethan looked at his watch. It was 9:30. "Ethan, let's call the police while we wait. Maybe they'll find Adriana today." "Dad, hi," Ethan said into the phone. "Hi, son. How are you, Dad?" "I really need your help." Ethan talked on the phone for a long time, writing down different numbers in his notebook. "Okay, Dad. Thank you. Yeah, I'll call Charles." It was about 10 o'clock, but the girl still hadn't shown up. "Charles, hello," Michael said excitedly. "It's about Adriana." "Yes, of course I know her. She's fine, and she has a good guardian. They're going back to the seaside in a couple of days. Clara's taking the girl on vacation before school." "Yes, it's 2 days later." Michael was trembling. "You've done it, you old toad," he swore, "and now not only you, but I'll have to answer for it." "Cindy, it's okay. They found your daughter," Ethan said cheerfully. "We just need to wait 2 days. Her guardian took her to the seaside before school." "God, I'm so glad Cindy," though she didn't remember her daughter, felt the love overflowing. Clara counted the money happily. "What a good fortune." She rejoiced at the last gift the girl had given me. She quickly pulled the credit cards out of her wallet. "We should destroy the evidence," she thought. "Cards are dangerous to deal with." Suddenly, a car pulled up to the house and there was a bang. Michael ran into the yard. He was angry. "You've had enough of this, haven't you? They're looking for your girl. Her mother's been found." Clara opened her mouth and couldn't believe it. "And with connections like that, you and me, we're screwed. Take the girl home quickly. Get her cleaned up. In 2 days, she'll be taken from her home to nowhere." "Michael, you fix it somehow." She said it in a pathetic voice. "Are you out of your mind?" "The prosecutor called me." He squealed with anger. Michael drove away. Clara stood in the middle of the yard, her little eyes twitching nervously. "I have 2 more days." Finally, she said, "The girl will be picked up today, and I'll say she was stolen. I'll make up a story that I was blackmailed by gypsies and forced Adriana to beg. They promised we'd both be killed. They came at night and took her away. They threatened that if I reported them to the police, they would lock me in the house and set me on fire." Great thoughts were running through her head. The main thing was to make it fit. "They won't do anything to me," she muttered to herself. "Cindy, it's 12 o'clock. Let's go for a walk somewhere and then go to a cafe for lunch. The girl's not here anyway. Maybe she won't show up today. They'll let me know if anything happens." "I asked the worker at the church to call me for a fee," Ethan said tiredly. "To be honest, I'm hungry too." She encouraged him. They got into the car and drove towards the square. Tishka the cat was lying in the tall grass. He lurked to recover a little. A stone had bruised his hind legs and thigh, and it hurt the cat to walk. He slowly wandered toward the church, making big stops. It was about 5 p.m. when he finally saw the church gate. It took him another hour or so to get there, so no one called. Ethan asked sadly, "I guess the girl wasn't here today. Let's drive home, or maybe we'll stop by. We'll take another look," asked his wife. "All right, let's." After about 20 minutes, they pulled up to an old oak tree. Getting out of the car, they approached the church. The girl wasn't there. Probably never came, Ethan sighed. Suddenly, there was a faint meow. It was her cat. "I know him." Ethan came up to him. "Why are you without your mistress today? She's let you down too." He reached out his hand and stroked the cat. Suddenly, he noticed a rope around his neck. Ethan wanted to pick up the cat, but it mewed in pain. "Are you hurt, brother?" Concerned, he said, "Cindy, help." The woman ran over, and the two of them took the rope off the cat. "What's this?" Taking some kind of package in his hand, Ethan was surprised. "Adriana." He read the note and saw a picture of his wife. Ethan couldn't get a word out. "Cindy, this girl is your daughter." He showed the note and the picture to his wife. "My God, how is this possible?" "Ethan, please, let's find her." Cindy burst into tears. "I feel the girl is in trouble." Ethan calmed down a little and with trembling hands dialed a number. "Charles, hello." Michael's phone was ringing off the hook, but he couldn't hear it. After talking to his aunt, he realized that his epaulets would fly now. He went back to work and closed the door. The closet door creaked. Cognac appeared on the table. Damn it all to hell. He cursed and drained the glass. So he sat alone until the bottle was empty. It was already dark. "Ethan, I beg you, do something." His wife sobbed. "Cindy, calm down. We'll find her now." The man put his arm around her shoulders. He waited for Charles to call, but he hadn't yet. Clara sat in the kitchen, keeping the light on. They had agreed that the gypsies would come as soon as it was dark. The house was in the middle of nowhere, so she had nothing to risk. Suddenly, someone knocked quietly on the window. She was alert. It must be mice. She thought. There was another knock. Did the gypsies come? She went to the door. "Who's there?" There was no answer. She sat down at the table. There was another knock. What the hell is Clara swearing at? The knocking on the window grew stronger. He could be heard at one window or the other. Clara was scared out of her wits. She wanted to turn on the light, but she couldn't get up out of fear. Suddenly there was a rustle and the window opened. "Devils, go away," she shouted. Something that looked like a snake slid down her legs. She jumped up and screamed. Suddenly someone's eyes lit up in the far corner. "No," she screamed at the devils. "Leave me alone." Clara was mad with fear. Something touched her leg again, and suddenly she felt a bite. She cried out like a screamer. She wanted to open the door, but she couldn't find it. Everything was jumbled up in her head. Suddenly something bit her again. "The devils want to eat me." She screamed at the top of her voice. At that time, the gypsies knocked on the gate, some shouting. "Do you hear that?" asked one of them with a sack in his hands. "It's the old witch. She's raiding us," replied the other, and they quickly dashed to the car in the bushes. Clara was still thrashing around the room, still screaming. Finally, she fumbled for the door handle and ran out into the street through the open door, limping into the street, and the cat came running out. "Help!" She ran around the yard. A police car pulled up to the house. "What's going on in there?" Hearing the screams, Ethan said. He and his wife and a few other policemen quickly got out of the car. The gate was locked. "Let's get in here," shouted the young policeman. "Give me a seat." Ethan and two other young men helped the man over 5 minutes later. He opened the gate headlights. Cars illuminated the house, scrambling back and forth across the yard. Running around was a distraught woman. "You guys take care of her and we'll go look for the girl," ordered one of the policemen. Turning on a flashlight, he pronounced Ethan. "Cindy, let's start at the barn." The door was locked. The old lock gave in quickly, and they opened it. The policeman illuminated the room. The smell told them there was a toilet in the shed. So someone lived here. Adriana shouted to Ethan. There was no answer. They dug around but found no one. When they entered the house, they searched all the rooms, but the girl was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, they heard the familiar meow of the cat Tishka. Are you there? Ethan petted the cat. It was her cat. The cat meowed and limped away. Walked forward. Then it came back again. He's trying to say something. Cindy guessed. Let's go after the cat, said the policeman. Tishka tried to tear with his claws the thick carpet in the far room. Get the rug off, shouted Ethan. Under the thick layer, they saw a small door in the floor. Some voices were heard downstairs. Mom yelled, Adriana, I'm here. The door on the lock has to be broken. A policeman shouted. I'll get a tire iron from the car. Adriana, it's okay. We're gonna help you. At the top of my voice, shouted Ethan. The girl heard something break through the floor above her. A few minutes later, the hole was completely open. Mommy, Mommy, shouted Adriana from around the corner. Cindy walked toward the basement, but lost her balance and fell down. Kathy opened her eyes. She came to, hearing the familiar voice of her daughter. Mommy, my love. Adriana gently stroked her mother's arm. How are you, Cindy? Pronounced her Ethan. I'm Kathy, she said quietly. Ethan wanted to hug her so badly, but she had a concussion and couldn't get up. Good. Let's get things started then. Smiling first, he said. My name is Ethan. And what's your name, Kathy? Her eyes shone with joy. Kathy was recovering quickly and was to be released home in a few days. Ethan sat by her bedside. I can't understand what you were doing there. He asked her. You mean on the moors? She understood him. It's very simple. After my grandfather died, Adriana and I found it hard to survive. We didn't have enough money. One day a strange man knocked on our door and said, I'll pay you good money. Find me this herb. It's a very rare herb, yes, and in the swamps it is only to be found. I answered, but you think I really need it? I'll pay you any money for it. This man is gone, and I'm still thinking, maybe I'll take my chances. The swamps are low-lying, I know. My grandfather taught me a lot of things. How to tell the difference between bumps and surface marsh grass, and how to get around bogs. I'll get this grass and Adriana, and I will live normally for a year. So I decided I'd go. I took Adriana to Betty, but I didn't tell her anything. If she knew, she'd never let me go. I got past the most dangerous bog, and I was just a little bit away. But then the rain started to fall. I stepped carefully along the narrow path, but stumbled on the slippery clay, grabbed a branch of a birch tree, and it was old. I rolled down, and then I felt a strong blow on my head in darkness. Adriana couldn't get used to her new home. She walked around, looking at the beautiful furniture and the big paintings on the walls. Adriana, my girl, she heard her mother's voice. You're up already. It's early to get up. This is the only thing Adriana has left from her past life. Mommy, Mommy, how much do I love you? She ran up to Kathy. I promise we will never be apart again. Kissing the girl, the mother said, You're early birds. Ethan came up to them. Uncle Ethan, come to us. Adriana hugged him. The three of them stood hugging each other in silence. Suddenly, Adriana ran downstairs and opened the door. She stepped out into a beautiful garden. Tishka the cat is my favorite. Opened the girl her arms. On the path between the bushes, the cat ran towards her and purred happily.